Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week by week basis. And today's topic of discussion is mental wellness. And on the conversation around mental wellness week, I want to talk about good friends, bad friends. I want to talk about like different things that you want to keep an eye out that gives you a sense that someone is probably like a bad friend to you. But I really just want to make sure that I caveat this by saying that I'm not coming at this from a self-righteous perspective. I have definitely been a bad friend to people who I cared very deeply about just based on how I showed up in those specific instances. And I think that also I want to really demarcate, because what makes someone a bad friend is it can be about personal dispositions for sure, or different beliefs and values that they have, that when those values and beliefs show up in your friendship, it's detrimental, it's toxic. But a lot of the times it's patterns of behavior. And I want to really emphasize patterns of behavior, because people can do things that are hurtful and that fail you. And it's either like a personality trait, it could be a character flaw, or it could be, just timing. There's so many different ways that people can fail to show up the way that we need them to, and not because they're bad friends. And so I know myself personally, there are specific personality traits of my own that make it so that like I am not the best friend in given circumstances. So I'm going to walk through those right now, because I really just want to make sure that people recognize that this discussion isn't about perfection. It's not about being perfect to be worthy of friendship. That's absolutely not it. But it's just about making sure that when you're evaluating your friendships, that when you think about the patterns of behavior that show up, that those patterns are ultimately healthy for you and not unhealthy. So different things that my friends have to know if it is the case that something comes up, and how I know for sure I will most likely fail them because of personality traits of my own. And so one of them is because I am someone who's hyper analytical. Like when you give me big news and you don't prep me for that big news, your first reaction is going to be disbelief. And it's not disbelief because I don't believe you, it's because I'm overstimulated immediately. And so this is always a very, very bad reaction when someone's disclosing something very personal, when they're disclosing trauma, when they're disclosing something that has to do with their identity. And in all of those cases where I have had friends who confided in me, I know I absolutely 100% failed them because I was not ready for that information. And when I am not ready for the information that gets landed in my lap, my first reaction is cannot compute. Like I just am very much in disbelief. I always do come around, and I think about three instances where this took place. I think I've already spoken on this channel. When I was a teenager, one of my closest friends growing up came out to me as being bisexual, and I grew up in a super conservative, very orthodox religious setting, and so I did not know how to take in this information. But luckily, because she showed me grace, she forgave me for my bad reaction. I had a bad reaction, but like I had a lot of inner conflict around like the judgment that I had around it, and that was ultimately why I broke away from religion because I recognized that how I felt I needed to respond in alignment with like the values that I had lived by or that I was indoctrinated with, which is just not the way I wanted to respond when I had a friend who was very scared, who confided in me, and I failed her in the way that I responded. And so when she came to me, was like, well, Rochelle, like I need you to be my friend in this. I decided, well, like I need to like adjust my values and my beliefs because I know her, I know this person, and I want to be there for her, right? But of course, like my first reaction was not a great reaction because I was not ready for that information. I felt very overstimulated. I felt very overwhelmed. And so I'm happy that we had the opportunity to build a bridge from that, but not the best way to support someone going through a bit of an identity crisis, right? And so that was a one-time thing. Like that happened once. And because of that lesson, I made sure that anyone who posed that kind of information with me, they felt safe. They felt like they were supported. They didn't feel that judgment from me. But the first time, definitely, it was not the best experience for either of us. Now, another personality trait that I have makes it so that I will probably fail my friend in this situation is even around like trauma, right? So I have my own trauma that I can speak to, and it takes me a lot. It took me 2 years of being stalked before I even came on here and spoke about it, and 5 years to talk about all of the specific details around it. So like I have a hard time speaking about the things that really do trigger me because like I'm still processing a lot of it, right? So it's hard for me to process it out loud. But I remember like there have been instances in my past where I've had friends disclose their own trauma, and some of it is SA trauma, and I did not react well because I was in disbelief, right? And so I think back often on those situations because when I went back and I reflected, I recognized that like there were signs, there were signals. I absolutely believed people who disclosed this information to me. But in that moment, like I know that my reaction probably really invalidated their experience. They were probably looking for compassion, for support, but I was too discombobulated by the information to be any of those things. So so now I know that if someone were to come to me talking about that kind of trauma, having now experienced my own trauma around the same similar situations, like not essay specifically, but having dealt with like aggravated sexual harassment, I will be more mindful hearing this information. It's not so far beyond my realm of reality, like my scope of reality, that I'm going caught up in disbelief. There was a time where it absolutely was something that was so far beyond my realm of reality that when someone would bring it up to me, like I would be so shocked by it. But I know I didn't show up for those friends in that moment. And so I regret that. And I wish that I could take my reaction back. I wish that I had gone even and discussed it. Like I absolutely believed them. And like when I think about it, like I saw the different signs, I recognize like how true this is as well. But I didn't really take the opportunity to do that because I was so embarrassed by my initial reaction. So all of that to say, like I'm mentioning these, and even like in emergency situations, one of my closest friends, how we became close is she passed out. We were working together. She passed out, and my immediate reaction was to try to feed her because I just remembered that something about blood sugar levels and orange juice, and all I had was a granola bar. And had I successfully fed her the granola bar, I mean, I'm sure she would not be okay. But just to show like emergency, high stress, high stimulating in like environments, like I really don't take that well. Like my disposition isn't really that great to handle it. I think I've become much better given like the high stakes settings that I've gone through. I think I've become a little bit more desensitized to that. But those are situations where that one experience could have really destroyed the friendship, could have really burned a bridge, right? But if I think about the pattern, it's something that only would need to show up once for me to like self-correct, educate, and get better from it. And even sometimes like I can have wildly inappropriate reactions to things when I feel uncomfortable and overstimulated. Typically that combination means I'm laughing in disbelief, right? So all of it again are just indicators of me saying, like when I talk about like bad friends or people who are not good friends to you, I'm not talking about like these characteristics or these personality traits that can be a little bit off-putting, because all of us have our own versions of them. I'm more so talking about the translation of a pattern in that dynamic, in that relationship that's hurting you, right? And so I'm going to talk about three key and core ones that I feel now in hindsight that if I had paid more attention to them, I could have safeguarded myself from a lot of the drama and a lot of the, I guess, unnecessary complications that I've experienced as a result of it, by being too graceful, too understanding, too non-judgmental about things that I should have been just much more cognizant that these are massive red flags that meant that like this person was not a friend that I should entertain or someone that I should allow to have additional access to me, because this pattern of behavior is destructive, not just for this person, but it's destructive for everyone who is associated with this person. And so now like I keep more of an eye on destructive behaviors because I don't think that they're good for anyone. But I think that also like if you do find that you do have a friend who engages in these destructive behaviors, I don't necessarily think that they're self-aware about them. So I think like of course have that conversation if they're asking for why you're seeking additional distance. But again, like I think that you have to be good within yourself. You have to find a certain degree of healing and inner alignment before you can be a good friend to other people. So with that said, with a focus on pattern of behavior, the patterns of behavior being what impact the relationship, I'm going to talk about characteristics that make someone a bad friend. And so the first characteristic that makes someone a bad friend is that there's no reverence for the things that you share with them. And so when I say that is like when you are disclosing personal details, or if they are exposed to personal details, the first thing they do is run and tell everyone about it, right? But they spin it in a way that it really makes you look like it puts you in a negative light. And only with time, like as you have conversations with people and people start asking you questions, when you think about like rules of a deduction, like how did they hear about this and know like the way that this is framed is incorrect, you find that there's like a pattern where there's this one individual who you consider a friend who's constantly disclosing information about you. And so I find that someone who seeks to find attention by mentioning you and only feels like they have attention when they mention you, like if they talk about something about their own life, they're not getting the same attention that they would gain if they were talking about you. Those are the kinds of friends that I would say now are just a huge liability. It's not the kind of friends that you want, because they can't honor your relationship. They can't honor the information that you're giving them, because all of that information for them is feeding their need for attention that they're not going to get unless they're talking about somebody else. And so someone who's very attention seeking in that they will do anything to grab attention, including talk about you and talk about your personal life and your personal details. I think that that's really, really important to make sure that when you recognize that behavior, you create a lot of distance and you recognize that those people cannot not be friends with you or with anyone with that kind of behavior, right? Someone who cannot hold information reverent, who always feels inclined, anything that they hear about you, to spread it like wildfire without fact checking, without understanding the context, without preserving you, even in the way that they share that information, is not your friend at all. And so I have entertained too many people like that. And those are the kinds of friendships that I have absolutely zero threshold for in my life now moving forward with experience, because I've had to deal with the wildfires that are caused by rumors, by things getting out of hand. Because the game of broken telephone, like say one thing and maybe not have bad intentions, but as it spreads, it shifts and changes. And by then, there's its own monster. It has its own life form, right? And when you realize that the root of it was just a person that you probably shouldn't have given so much access to your life, then after like the second or third time, you recognize that you're the one who's at fault. You shouldn't have given that person that level of visibility or access or proximity to you in your life. And so the next one that I have are people who are very cavalier about your safety, about your security, and about your reputation. So people who are very comfortable putting you in really uncomfortable and dangerous situations. And so I've been friends with people who engage in behaviors or in activities that they knew I absolutely was not about. And I, again, have always been a very live and let live human being. So you can like do things that I myself am not interested in doing. You can engage in behaviors and in activities that I myself am not interested in engaging in, and I can still consider us friends. I wouldn't have an issue with still like meeting at the crossroads where we do have things in common, where we do have things that we can discuss. But if you recognize that this isn't something that I want to do and there's like certain degree of risks associated with it, and then you try to inadvertently implicate me in those things, like those are not good friends. People who put you in situations where you could get in trouble, where it's dangerous, where there's an elevated risk, not the people you want to engage with. Those are not the kind of friends that you want to engage with. And I think that even for me, when I think about how that has translated in my life, it has translated in my life in ways where I was put in very compromising situations and very vulnerable situations. I was isolated in situations that were very dangerous. Those are the friends that I chose to keep. So anyone who's very cavalier about your security, about your comfort, about the risk that they expose you to, it's not the kind of person you want as a friend. Like that's the kind of person who I would consider to be like a wolf in sheep's clothing, especially if you find that there are situations that they put you in, right? Like they put you in situations where you would have never found yourself in that situation if it wasn't for that person themselves, right? And I think there's accountability on both parts here. Like there's some critical thinking that you need to do as well. And luckily I've been able to like leverage my own critical thinking in these situations, recognizing that like these people are just not my friends. Like there are certain things that if people expose you to or try to do with you. And so this is sort of on the spectrum of frequency and impact, right? Like there are certain things like they have to happen both times for you to recognize like this is a pattern of behavior that you don't want to expose yourself to, that is not healthy for you, and you should nip in the bud. But there's certain things that they happen once and they're so vile and so blatantly like seeking to harm that you don't need to have it happen more than one time for you to like adjust your behavior in alignment to that new information. With that new information, you align yourself accordingly. And I find like a lot of this stems from envy and jealousy. And I think that like for me, I'm a girl's girl. I have always been a girl's girl. I have a love to have female like friendship. And I think what happens is if we're all competing for the same like male gaze, and I think that in instances that I was speaking about like in the past, like I think that that was the case, then you find like friends turn really ugly because there's someone that likes you that doesn't like them, so on and so forth. So like this can be something that it doesn't just end in high school. So for those of you who think that like this competition for attention ends at high school, it does not. This continues well into later on in our lives. And I'm so happy that I'm with my partner now, and those are not dynamics that I have to deal with. But a lot of my friendships were shifted and changed because of a male, because of a boy, right? A lot of my friendships took on a different form because of a boy, right? And either it's because of how that boy decided to position himself, or because I had a friend who liked that boy and that boy was more so interested in giving me attention. But I find that if you have friends who can't maintain the friendship when there's outside dynamics that are kind of impeding or infringing on your dynamic, like if they can't like hold your friendship sacred, then that's not a friend that you want to maintain. That's not a friendship you want to maintain. You want to maintain those relationships because oftentimes what happens is that envy or that competition makes them want to kick you down a couple of notches so that they feel more, I guess, desirable in comparison. And like I say that not tongue in cheek, like those are exactly the instances that I have found myself in. And so as a girl's girl, I think it's important to be a girl's girl with someone where you're competing in completely different pools by way of the male attention that you're looking for. And again, I'm not single anymore, so this isn't something that I need to worry about as much in my life. But for those of you who are single, recognize that competition can be a really, really toxic factor once introduced into your relationship. Pretty much can be what kills that relationship altogether. So all of these three specific instances or patterns of behavior that I feel, if they are translating in your friendship, these are really very clear red flags if that friendship probably isn't healthy for you, is probably not toxic to continue. I also want to just caveat, like, this isn't about the personality traits, right? So I started the discussion off by just talking about how my imperfections really can play a role in creating a certain degree of hurt in relationships. Again, like my inability to take in big information all at once, the fact that I feel overstimulated and overwhelmed and need time to process like big information, and it could be your trauma that you're communicating to me, that I am taking way too much time to figure out like how I feel about it, because it just completely reshifted and reorganized all of the values, all of the beliefs that I had around all of the players that are now implicated in that, right? And so I have a lot of regret for the ways that I know that my personality traits, like specific personality traits, have hurt my friends. And also the fact that like I like to create distance when I feel vulnerable, right? Like I create a certain degree of distance, and that in and of itself can be really hurtful. People who don't understand why I'm creating it. And even sometimes I don't know why I feel the need to create just like this gut reaction when I'm feeling unsafe. Like when I'm feeling unsafe, when I'm feeling unsure, like my first step is create distance so I can think about it, right? So I think all of it ties down to my like inability to do things spontaneously. I always try to figure out a way to give myself the space to intellectualize the information that's coming in front of me so I find the appropriate position. But in all cases, these are some hard, fast rules that I have learned just from life experience that I think that it would be beneficial for all of you to think about. It can save you a lot of heartache in the future, essentially. So that was it. Some food for thought for you. Some of the things that I wanted to talk about. Like if you're not aware, I am actually hosting a free parent-child workshop on Sunday, February 1st. So if you're interested to see how these parent-child workshops function and how we build community virtually within these workshops, and I do suggest that you fill out the survey that we have in the chat and see if whether or not this is something that you would like to participate in. I think it's only an hour and a half that I have planned just to give a bit of a teaser and then give you an opportunity to have more periphery on our signature courses as well. And though we do offer programs for adults. So yes, we do offer programs for adults who are seeking to get more by way of self-mastery, focus on their own development journey. So this is something that is interesting to you, then I do suggest that you take a look at our website. Make sure you subscribe. We do send emails providing you visibility on the offers that we're providing and different communal events that we're hosting as well. And again, like if you're still here enjoying this conversation, getting something from it, then please do subscribe. Every subscription definitely helps. Leave a comment down below on your position by way of red flags that give you a sense that someone's like not a good friend for you. And again, our focus is really on patterns of behavior that negatively impact the relationship. And let's keep the conversation going. Thank you so much again for giving us this small role to play in your journey, and we'll talk to you all very soon.